Hi, everyone. Welcome to Retail Reset, which is a curated virtual forum of content and conversations designed to help retail executives map the road to recovery and beyond. Today, I'm joined by Greg Buzek, who's the president of IHL Group and also the founder of the Retail ROI charity organization. Today, Greg and I are going to be talking specifically about how businesses that are categorized as non-essential can innovate to survive post-COVID-19 crisis. Welcome, Greg. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Debbie. It's good to see your face.
Yeah, good to see you also. We're seeing a lot of each other via video these days, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's nice in a way, you know, even though we can't see each other in person. At least we're able to chat.
Yep.
All right. Well, so first, Greg, maybe you can just fill us in on, you know, what's going on with your business, how you're holding up, and what you've been working on.
Well, it's been crazy for us because, believe it or not, we're actually doing quite well. The economy was going so strongly during 2019, leading into early 2020, that actually demand for our services was down. People didn't need the leads because there were so many leads. People didn't need the insight as to what the market was going to because they had seen that. And now there's quite a bit of demand for that, and it's actually been positive for us for the last 2 months there. So we're very fortunate in that respect. So.
Okay. All right. So let's just jump into the topic for today. We wanted to hyper focus on one of the retail categories, and we know that all business segments are dealing with challenges to stay in business during this crisis. But the companies identified as non-essential have a unique set of challenges. Can you share, your high-level overview of these businesses? You know, who are the non-essential businesses and the challenges that they're dealing with?
Yeah, what a horrible word to describe your business, particularly for those that have been forced to be closed, because they certainly are essential to their livelihood and survival there. But generally, it means the things that are discretionary and not necessarily related to, your food, shelter type of situations. Those have been considered related to non-essential businesses. So it's everything from clothing to luggage, apparel, sporting goods, furniture, etc. Those sort of things that are discretionary purchases. Interestingly enough, you're doing work on your home, doing anything to do with gardening and other things are considered essential because the repairs need to be done. So those are considered to be essential. And the word varies quite a bit from township to township as to what is essential. In some locations, I could say right now, I don't have this problem, but most people would say hair salons are probably essential right now for a lot of people.
Yeah, we're handling it.
Everything like that. I really don't have that problem, but so it's those categories. Easiest way to say this is mall-based retail is the easiest way to say it. Main street retail in most categories. As well, smaller ends.
All right. So what are some of the ways that these businesses have been able to innovate in order to survive, during this crisis, and what were they going to need to do as we move into recovery?
Yeah, it's when you talked about the non-essential folks, I think there's some unique challenges that came into play depending on the type of retailer that's in play. Most department stores would fulfill their e-commerce through a warehouse. They wouldn't necessarily fulfill their e-commerce through their stores. However, a lot of your fashion stores fulfill primarily through their stores. The inventory is at the stores because the seasons are so quick. So your Zara, the H&M, and those kind of folks are so much in demand so quickly that all their merchandise was at the store level, and yet they couldn't get into the stores. So as some of these lockdowns are released, and you can say 25% or 50% being able to get into the stores, what that does is unleash all that inventory that's now available to be shipped from there, because there was great limitations on what you could ship from whatever you just had in a place where you could do it. I mean, I think Arkansas didn't have a lockdown, so a lot of e-commerce articles were coming out of Arkansas because those stores could still be open and you could take orders that way. So the unique challenges there, they varied by the individual segments, and some of the pivoting, I'm not as familiar with the non-essential categories because they're kind of locked down. There's a lot of planning, a lot of rent changes, lots of decisions there and planning going forward. It's in the essential categories where we had this huge push on demand for certain products and things that are stuck in different supply chains that were very drastically different. I mean, who would have said, if anybody would have come to you in January and said the most effective restaurant promotion this year is going to be giving away a roll of toilet paper for every meal over $20, and nobody would look twice if you walked into a bank or into a liquor store with a mask in 3 months, you would have been locked up. Everybody would just thought you're, and yet some of these pivots that are occurring from some of these retailers to say, you know what, there's plenty of toilet paper. It's just being sent to offices and to restaurants and other places. Let me figure out a way to get my hands on that and then sell it through my supply chain for what that demand is. So it's that creativity that's involved there. I think the other aspect of it is this has been an excuse, particularly for those who have been shut down. The first step they had to go through, unfortunately, is a lot of furloughs in deciding who to keep and who not to keep. So now you have essential employees. Like I said, that horrible term. But what you end up with there is now you start planning and say, okay, business has changed in our world for good. How are we going to do business going forward? So when you think of clothing, how are we going to deal with returns? How are we going to deal with dressing rooms? How long do we keep stuff? Do we have storage to put it in when it comes back, or it comes there to where it's been tried on? I can't sell this, or I can't do anything with this for a 24-hour period. Do I have the spots to do that? How do I manage that? How do I manage things in terms of orders? Do my supply chain, do I not only have to have nearshoring and that side of things, but where I keep all my merchandise? Am I going to be so store forward with my merchandise to where we were literally shut down because we had nothing in a warehouse that we could ship? Those sort of things. And each business is going to look at that in so many different ways. Are they going to now reevaluate? Do I want to be in a mall where I don't have any control over whether I can get in the door to do that? If I'm in an off-mall location and I needed to get in there to get merchandise to ship out, I could get in there and do that. That's harder to do in a mall location. So am I rethinking all of those things? And I think that's the challenge that each of these retailers is going through right now. And it's an opportunity to say, you know what, we've had this traditional way of doing things and we've wanted to change it, but there's always been somebody in the way or some culture in the way. You know what, culture can go right out the door in the case of a pandemic, and you can change that culture towards what you need to succeed going forward. So in a lot of ways, you can break down a lot of these barriers that have been holding you back because the historical nature of your business over time.
So are there any particular retailers that you can think of that are handling this well right now? As you're talking, I'm wondering, how are some of these businesses going to figure out, know what the steps they need to take are, right? Because you talk about, the issues with inventory and returns and supply chain. How are they going to know what to do? Is anybody setting a good example right now?
I'm not sure if I've heard about it yet because I've been sequestered like everybody else. I think I can give you some examples from the ones that are out there working, the so-called essential, that I think have done a terrific job of pivoting very, very quickly on things. In the restaurant space, Texas Roadhouse has done a fantastic job. Chick Fil-A has done a fantastic job. Chick Fil-A from those that I've talked to, or restaurants around us, because of the meals that are going to the offices, complexes, and to the hospitals and those things that have been open, their business may not even drop because the catering business picked up so much more. They opened up 3 to 4 drive-throughs now instead of 1 to 2. Texas Roadhouse has got this takeout thing just nailed, and they're doing a fantastic job with people with handhelds and tablets out there and managing the process there, and they're processing tremendous amounts of orders there. I think Outback Steakhouse, we went because restaurants opened here in Tennessee last week, and we went Saturday night to Outback, and I tell you, the line for takeout was huge. Now they could only use half the dining room because it's 50%. It was pretty much full for the 50% that was there, but their outside and their pickup and everything else was doing really well. So they transitioned to these family style meals for pickup. We've seen that. Another one, two other ones that come to mind, Speedway. You think about getting hit hard. Not only do you have gas prices dropping dramatically there, but people don't want to come into the store, so that driving the traffic into the store where they make most of their money there. Yet they ended up at the end of March up because they were able to pivot to some of those higher demand categories for the shutdown. Some of those things that were being not available in the grocery stores were now available at the local convenience store, and they were able to pivot a bit to that. Plus they had the tobacco and the alcohol benefits as well in there, and done a nice job. And then I would say, I think Costco has really done a terrific job at replenishing their supply chain and being out ahead of the PR side of things there, and explaining things more than just about anybody else in terms of there. When we had this toilet paper shortage, it came back first, it seemed, at a Costco, or at least that's the news that I saw. Costco got it before Sam's or a Walmart type thing. Same with cleaning materials, that those were available there. So those are some folks that I saw pivot, but a lot of that is just the speed at which you can say, hey, it's there. It's not like it's a production problem that this was never made or it's stuck in China. It's that, where is it? Let's go get it, and let's get it packaged in a format in a way that is there. I think those people that went and said, where can I find these high demand things, that said, you know what, it had to do with it's in an office supply location, it's in a restaurant supply location. Those people that said, you know what, instead of having a run on fruits here or whatever, maybe I can go to a restaurant supplier and get that rather than worry about it elsewhere. Same thing, we're now facing meat shortages as of today. Those who would have been able to go there for that kind of thing as well. I've got people that go to Texas Roadhouse to just order steaks. Yeah. Not cooked. Steak.
Oh, really?
So they can get access to the.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yeah, we've actually picked up produce from a restaurant supply company because they had an excess, and so they were able to communicate in our community that was available, and so you could schedule time to pick it up.
Right, and I think like farmers markets being able to stay open, and how they had to pivot, I think I grew up in Ohio. In Ohio, we have these pony kegs where you can literally just drive in and they load up your car. And everybody would laugh. What do you mean? You can just drive in and they load up the beer in your car? Yeah,
drive through liquor. Yeah,
that's the way it's always worked. Well, that's like the leading edge of retail right now, is pulling in and they just load you up,
Right.
And it's just really funny. But you had a lot of restaurants move to that alcohol to go now. So if you wanted the craft brew, you could get, a growler to go as part of that. So some of that pivoting and some things. So just a lot of creativity that's involved when you're trying to survive.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it sounds, like traditional retailers can learn a lot from the hospitality industry, because they've had, for example, Open Table, right, to make reservations, and retailers are going to have to move in that direction, where they may have to make appointments for people to come to their store.
But we're going to talk about this in our webinar tomorrow. What's interesting and fortunate for the specialty stores, in particular the apparel stores, mm-hmm. is the months of April, May, and June tend to be the least dollar amount of sales normally mm-hmm. throughout the year. So it's not like they're closing down at Christmas time or they're there. So that's actually a benefit, that this is the slower period of time. So if they open up at 50%, they weren't running more than 50% to begin with. So it's not a huge thing unless they enforce it has to be by appointment only. And that's where the government aspects and really where you live has a drastic, change in how you think about this thing. Just think about it overall. For instance, if you're in New York City, the case rate and the death rate is over 120 times higher than it is here where I live in Tennessee. So that perspective difference has a big impact on how you think. So where the retailer is based, where their staff is based, greatly affects their thinking of how they think about the entire nation. And the entire world in terms of what can open up when. I think a lot of these retailers now, the smart ones, are looking towards China and Korea, who have opened already, and looked at what have those retailers done that have worked and not worked, and how can we apply that.
How big a factor do you think it is, the fear that there might be a reoccurrence or resurgence of the virus in the fall and winter, and how retailers are thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it's something that you've got to plan for mm-hmm. and be prepared for. I mean, if you go through this and it's business as usual and you're a clothing store, knowing you're going into the fall and a potential for this to come back, you're just inviting death if you make it through this period there. So I think you plan for the worst and you hope for the best there. I think really as well, here in the U.S., we have just messed up testing so badly, so poorly, that I believe in New York City, this is personally, I believe the case numbers in New York City are probably almost to the level of herd immunity in New York City. They just never got tested in time, during the time, et cetera, which is very different everywhere else in the country. I have 5 family members that have all had it. One of them was a nurse, his sister there in New York City. They never really showed any symptoms. Mm-hmm. Their mom, dad, and aunt in Ohio got it through a whole other realm of a nursing home exposure and hospital exposure there. In New York, they could never get tested because they were young and healthy and never had to go to a hospital. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of that stuff is going to come out in the fall. The question is whether or not if you had it, you're going to get it again. All those things have to be worked out, and you have to plan for all of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's your point that you have to plan for the worst because there's so many unknowns involved. Right. So you really have to. So just one more quick question back to retail strategies. For companies that have been primarily focused on their brick and mortar stores, how important is it for them to double down on their online e-commerce business, and how will that affect their whole supply chain system?
Yeah, and once again, I think it really is dependent on who you are as a retailer and what you are. Right now, the TJX, Ross stores, those guys don't have a big online presence. Ironically, they're one of my favorite. When you look at who's paid rent, they are the ones that have continued to pay rent of all the fashion stores, even though they're getting almost no income coming in there because they don't have that online. Now, the end of the year, they're going to have all kinds, their pick of the litter when it comes to merchandise because of the department stores and the specialty stores that can't sell it now, mm-hmm. That they're going to be able to sell. So it's going to swing back for them very positive in the fall. But I think they're, rethinking, hey, we want to be 95%, bricks and mortar there to open up some of those, other channels related to that. I just don't know how well the appointment only retailing and the pick up at the curb retailing, when that's, deployed, is going to help much. It's very similar to the restaurants, and we've seen it a lot in Texas. The restaurants can open at 25% today. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, but 25% opening, I can't make that work.
Right.
The financials just don't work out. And each retailer has to look at it and say, does it make sense for me to open and take the risks associated with things if I can only open at this particular amount of level in that particular area? I will say the thing that is going to change quite a bit, and it's going to be forced in the near term, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, is the rents and the leases had gotten to be ridiculous. The retail rate per square footage that was out there, those are going to come down dramatically, except for your A malls out there. So this is really a point in time that is an incredible opportunity to renegotiate those rents for those retailers that are there, and reset that point for things. And unfortunately, there's just going to be a lot of in what we would call these non-essential categories. We're projecting close to 300,000 stores are going to close in 2020. A lot of those being 1 to 10 store chains. The mom and pops, the stimulus plans have greatly impacted those. And I think we're going to see some chains, big chains, that are going to die out there. But the brands will survive, but the formats of there being a store related to that brand are probably going to go away in some cases, but it's a much lower rate than what we're seeing with the 1 store and 2 to 9 store chains. They simply don't have the reserves and access to capital out there. And unfortunately, the stimulus plans caused problems because they've got to hire people back, but they can't open their stores. They're making more money on unemployment in many states, upwards of $30 an hour not to work. If they offer them a job, they won't come back. Well, if they decline it, then they get kicked off of unemployment. So now you've got this adversarial relationship between the things. We had 2 competing sides giving the plans, and each one of the plans by themselves was good, but together they're kind of like a mess.
Mm-hmm. And you really need to know how to manage the communications between, internally with your employees and potential employees, because we've already seen some stress in some places where, the employees who are working right now are under so much stress that they're not handling, customer service very well.
Right. Well, you got childcare issues, you've got health issues there, but there's really three things that you have to have nailed going into this to be realistic about getting your employees back. One was you're offering some sort of benefits that they're going to lose if they stay on unemployment. They're going to lose their healthcare benefits. That's a huge advantage that the larger companies have over the smaller companies at getting their employees back. The second thing is your company culture. If people were loving their job there and didn't want to leave otherwise, that's a huge benefit there. And then, I lost train of thought on what the third one was, but loving their job, the culture, the benefits there, and the ineptitude of the state unemployment office to where the people are promised $600, but they haven't actually gotten it yet. Mm-hmm. So if your unemployment office is able to, if it hasn't gotten there, you're far more likely to get those people to come back to work because they've never seen that money yet.
Right.
And as such, they're going to be able to get back. So when you talk about supply issues, there's a supply of labor, there's a supply of materials, and there's a supply of, we call it demand, but the supply of customers to come in there. Plus, now you've got to deal with all the extra regulations required, masks, wiping things down, returns. How do you do your HVAC systems, et cetera?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can see why there's a great need for consulting services like yours, because there is an unending list of topics and challenges that all companies have to deal with, and
yeah, it's really dizzying right now, and it's changing every day. That's the part that is, people ask, are we going to have a V curve? Are we going to have an L curve? Recovery. It really depends on how wide you want to make the time horizon as to whether or not it's a V or an L type of thing. We were running it, and as long as we go out, we started at the beginning of 2020 and go out to 2023, everything looks like a V. But if you look at it from a longer perspective, it actually elongates that recovery, because it's not so concentrated on a screen.
All right. Well, I think we're going to end here, Greg. I really appreciate all of your insights. And I know that, we all wish that we could do a more accurate job of predicting exactly what's going to happen and how to get through. But I think, we definitely learn from some of the other countries and what they've done, and some of we'll also be learning from some of our states that are opening up right now.
I think thank you. And I think the most important thing for those of you that are retailers on this is those that survive and those who start towards the end of the year will have an unprecedented time, an opportunity for growth, because so many companies are not going to make it during the time. A lot of that demand that was being split out is now going to come to you. So those that do survive could see a great pickup in their own individual sales there. So that ability to pivot is crucial to things. So
absolutely. All right. Well, stay safe and healthy.
Appreciate it. You too.
Thanks to everybody for joining us, and be on the lookout for more Retail Reset content.
All right. Thanks.